Where's your sense just right now of where things are at? You're obviously on the booths there, still trying to help your party get over the line?
Yeah, Tom, look, we're pretty confident here in Cooper. I mean, Jonty Bush has done an amazing campaign since I announced that I was stepping down. And also, of course, many people would know Jonty Bush from, being Young Australian of the Year some years ago, as well as developing the One Punch Can Kill campaign. So the feeling on the ground here is quite secure. As you've seen, Labor's polling pretty strongly in southeast Queensland.
Overall, it seems to be most people's favourite, a Labor minority. Do you think it's going to be harder? Are we sensing a bit of a shift overall, a bit of a rise of the Greens for either side to be able to have a clear majority in Queensland?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Greens have been more active this campaign than they've ever been in the inner city seats here. Of course, we've got the contest in South Brisbane, but also in the inner city rim. But I'm pretty confident that people are going to vote for strong government. I think people, as we're getting closer and closer to the election, are understanding that there is a stark choice between Labor that can still form majority government under the Premier's leadership, or ending up with a mixed bag and a hung parliament, which just isn't good for our economy.
So the 2 to 3 seats you think it will turn. If we're watching tonight and we can see these various seats swing, what will you keep a really close eye on for both sides in terms of what it might mean voters have decided today?
Yeah, as you've already said in your commentary today, Tom, I think that obviously all eyes will be on Townsville. We've seen the Leader of the Opposition go up to Townsville today to try to see if they can secure those seats. There's been a lot of effort from all political parties in that region. I've been up there throughout the campaign. I think the Whitsundays will go back to the Liberal Party, coming from Jason Costigan, who defected, as you know. You've already touched on Morani and One Nation probably losing that seat. Shane Hamilton, our candidate, has done a really good job there as well. So I think that is a one to watch. And then, of course, we saw the Premier do a blitz from the Sunshine Coast to the Gold Coast towards the end of their campaign. So I think there might be some interesting results in the Sunshine Coast and also on the southern Gold Coast. We expect that we might be able to get Currumbin back. We've got a great candidate there. And, of course, we've got Jan Stuckey, the former LNP minister, who has defected, and her husband's running there. So, look, this is one of those tight elections. We're going to see, I think, a lot of what is almost like mini by-elections across Queensland. So, it's a very close election to call, and I think we're going to be up tonight looking at all of those seats individually.
So the borders we'll get to in a moment. The other issue that has probably hit headlines, particularly both in and outside of Queensland, was this curfew idea from the LNP for parts of the north of the state. If we do see big swings towards the LNP there, will Labor have to take stock and wonder if more needs to be done, particularly around some of this really senseless crime? Small businesses saying, they keep getting damage to property and, essentially people just stealing things out of shops, that it just makes it so hard to run a business.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've been very upfront about saying that we want to tackle crime. That's why, unlike the LNP when they were in government, that cut hundreds of police from the front line, we're going to this election saying a vote for Labor means 2,000 more police on the beat. Look, there is no doubt crime will be an issue in Townsville, but it's whether you can trust the LNP. When they were in government last time, they cut police. So, look, I think that will play out there. I think there's been a bit of pushback on the curfew here in southeast Queensland, and interestingly on borders, I can honestly say people that have never voted for me before, and I know a lot of people in this community have said they acknowledge the Premier's leadership in keeping them safe here. So I think, there's been a lot of talk in the newspapers leading into this week that there are some Conservative voters who actually might be voting Labor for the first time to back in the Premier's stance on the borders.
So on the borders, this has been something we've heard again and again and again from Anastasia Palaszczuk. We take the health advice on this. The CHO actually makes decisions once a public health emergency is declared. There's obviously input from the government, but this one's longer than any other, obviously. Is this the sort of pandemic? This is not this, immediate short-term issue. It's a long-rolling one where the government needs to factor in the economy a bit more. You get all the health advice. You don't ignore that, but you have to weigh it up with the economic impact, particularly with a tourism state. And I know that's an area you were in as Tourism Development and Tourism Minister. That it relies on it so much. You can't just say health advice. There are other considerations.
Well, absolutely, but as we've said, I think the Premier has shown that she has strength when it comes to making the decisions for Queensland. And certainly you're right, Tom, this is something that we as a country are going to have to live with for some time until a vaccine is not only developed but also distributed. So, you know, this is what we've seen both from the National Cabinet under the leadership of the Prime Minister to premiers across different states, is a transitioning and a phasing of that approach. But certainly I think Queenslanders will demonstrate today at the ballot box that they appreciate that we didn't see a second wave and the shutdown that we saw in Victoria. So, you know, it's a tough, you know, this is a tough call, and
that's
and
true.
Certainly from
that's absolutely true.
And so look, you know, we've got to. Sorry, you go.
Sorry, I'm just conscious of a little bit of time. I guess the point is this: we understand health advice, but we also elect our officials, and people elect their premier to make decisions. But it's not just purely health advice. If there's any risk at all from COVID, you could shut the borders for the next 5 years and say, well, there might be one case of COVID. Of course you don't, because you do weigh up the economy. Do we need to see a bit more in the next few months, even as soon as this election's ended, the Premier saying she is still making a decision and she is factoring in the economy?
Look, I think what you will see is what we have demonstrated since the crisis began is a phasing of the approach. Obviously, the Premier's made hard decisions around border closures. You know, as we continue to see community transmission come under control, and we all hope that it does in Victoria and New South Wales. And want to see, I mean, the Premier said very clearly at the debate yesterday that she hopes that we can actually move as quickly as possible to all of Australia open to Australians. I think what has been very interesting this campaign is, you know, the LNP changing from their position, which was ignore the Chief Health Officer's advice, to actually now, Deb Freckington said very clearly at the debate yesterday and at the Sky debate during the week that she would actually listen to that health advice. So I think there has been movement in the LNP position throughout the campaign, and I think that's reflective of the public sentiment that I'm certainly seeing and hearing on the ground.
Perhaps on that, to be fair to Deb Freckington, and that was a comment I think in June re Victoria, she has been saying for quite a long time since then that she follows the health advice. Let me ask you this then finally.
I don't think people believe it. I think that's the problem. and this is perception.
Well, you can say, you can say believe, but as I said, yes, she made that comment in June, and it might well be, we'll see, but since then she has been essentially with the same policy. Again, as Tourism Minister, let me put this to you as an important distress to the people out there that are running these businesses. It's not a zero-risk approach. It can't be a zero-risk approach. It's not eradication. So if there are a few cases, but it's very, very low risk in Sydney and down the track in Melbourne, that the Labor government would be willing to say, we better open up?
Yeah, what I think we've definitely seen, and I think this is great for all Australians, is that I think that in Queensland we had a very strong tracing program in place, and I think what we've seen is more and more resources going into both Victoria and New South Wales to ensure that where there is coronavirus in the community, they can trace it, they can track it down, and they can shut it down. And I think there is a lot more confidence moving forward, and I think that gives us all hope that in the future we can open up all of Australia to all Australians, and certainly that's what I would love to see.